The weight of a great war has fallen upon the lands to which all Abrahamic religions ascribe great sanctity. On one side stood Saladin Ayyubi, the legendary ruler of the great Ayyubid dynasty, with his army of 26,000 men, while on the other stood Baldwin IV, the young king of Jerusalem, barely 16 years old and debilitated by leprosy, with his army of 3,000 men. Should predicting the outcome of this encounter be very difficult? But on that day, in a place called Mongizar in the Ramla region, an event occurred that even today historians and experts cannot explain, and some even describe as a miracle. Young Baldwin, perhaps facing his last battle on the brink of death, attacked Saladin's army directly with his forces, and 3,000 men almost completely annihilated the 26,000-strong army, driving them deep into the desert. So, was this event merely a maneuver executed with the right strategy at the right time? Or did Baldwin and the Crusaders easily bring to its knees an army 10 times their size, thanks to a forbidden power from ancient history they found in the mysterious catacombs of Jerusalem? Together, we will embark on a quest for a mystery lying in the forgotten times of history. A mystery so dark that even today, certain powers would, if necessary, burn the entire world to obtain it. Welcome to Find the Truth. To understand the true nature of Jerusalem, its spiritual and mysterious gravitational pull, we need to go beyond empires and kingdoms, to a civilization at the dawn of history, Sumer. In Sumer, one of the oldest civilizations in history, people believed that their gods, called the Anunnaki, descended from the heavens to bring order to the earth. One of the cities where the belief in these gods was most intensely experienced after the flood was Ur, built by the Sumerians, from which, according to Israelite sources, Prophet Abraham is believed to have migrated to find the truth. Prophet Abraham's journey from the city of Ur to the land of Canaan, which would later become the land of Israel, was not merely a geographical migration. It was also a bridge established between the Sumerian belief system and early Hebrew tradition. Some historians and researchers suggest that the theological concepts of powerful Anunnaki gods like Enlil or Marduk may have evolved over time to form the basis of the understanding of a single and absolute God in early Hebrew tradition, that is, the Creator, more often referred to as the Lord in the Torah. In fact, when we examine these religions today, we can clearly see this approach in their books. However, philosophically, that is, before they first emerged and became systematic religions through human intervention, I think the situation was very different. And while the people called prophets struggled to end this false symbolism, unfortunately the belief they spread later became a victim of people who insisted on this symbolism. I told you about this in my Melchizedek and Khidr video. Long before the Israelites arrived in these lands, when the Canaanites made this region their home, the area was an important power center known as Urushalem. The city took its name from Shalem, the pagan Canaanite god of twilight. A very fitting name for a city stuck between the visible world and the invisible realm of spirits. Archaeological excavations and discovered traces indicate that this was a sacred place where the paths of merchants, mystics, and warriors intersected, with altars dedicated to gods on high hills. During the time of King David, Jerusalem was conquered by the Israelites and crowned as the capital of the United Kingdom. However, the person who gave the city its true identity and ultimate symbol was his son, Prophet Solomon. According to narratives, King Solomon built his magnificent first temple to protect the Ark of the Covenant, which contained the tablets inscribed with the Ten Commandments, and to establish a bridge of communication between heaven and earth with its power. The Ark was placed on the foundation stone, believed to be the heart of the temple, referred to as the Holy of Holies, the point where God began to create the universe, the navel of the world. For the Israelites, this was a cosmic anchor where earth and heaven merged, the center of their spiritual existence. But no victory in history is permanent. In 586 BCE, King Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon razed the city, tore down its walls, and turned that glorious temple into a pile of dust. During this destruction, the Ark of the Covenant was also lost and never found again, taking its place among legends. Nevertheless, Kulius always managed to rise from its ashes and refused to die. Those who returned from the Babylonian exile built the second temple under the patronage of the Persian Empire, and the city rose from its ashes once again. In 70 AD, while the Romans suppressed a major Jewish revolt in the region, they completely burned and destroyed the second temple, turning it to ash. Only one piece remained from that magnificent structure: the Western Wall, or today's Wailing Wall. This wall is like a deep scar, both on the face of the city and in the hearts of many Jews. And interestingly, no matter how powerful, elite, and American presidents there are, whether Jewish or not, they come here and perform some kind of ritual. I will tell you about this topic one day. By 698 AD, the Muslim armies under the command of Caliph Omar took possession of the city, and despite all the fears of the people, instead of erasing Jerusalem's Jewish and Christian past, they further sanctified it within their own belief system. They built the Dome of the Rock, one of the most magnificent works of Islamic architecture, directly on top of the Temple Mount, at the exact spot where that famous foundation stone is located. This structure, built by the Umayyad Caliph Abd al-Malik in 691 AD, was never actually designed as a mosque in the classical sense. The Dome of the Rock was built exactly at that spot for a specific reason, more as a shrine, a monument, a marker of a sanctity even older than Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. The bare rock at the very heart of the structure, the foundation stone, is the main reason why Jerusalem has become the most debated and sacred piece of land on the planet. And behind this, as you will see shortly, there is a very dark story. For the Hebrews, this stone was known as Yuen HaShatiyah, the foundation stone. According to their belief, this was the axis of the universe, where creation began. It was the very center of existence's cosmic plan, where God first breathed the breath of life into the universe. The Holy of Holies, the innermost and most sacred part of the first and second temples, was also located precisely here. Only the high priest could enter this chamber once a year on Yom Kippur, the holiest day. Some Jewish and Christian traditions also say that this stone was where Prophet Abraham endured his greatest trial. That is, it was the summit of Mount Moriah where God commanded him to sacrifice Ishmael. In Islamic belief, this rock is the sacred spot where Prophet Muhammad began his Miraj journey. According to tradition, Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven from this rock on the back of the legendary steed Buraq, crossing the seven heavens to appear before Allah. If we take things into a more esoteric realm, according to Jewish mysticism, this stone was not just an ordinary rock. It was a divine seal, a keystone placed by God Himself to keep the chaotic depths beneath the earth, the Tehom, under control. They believed that without this stone, chaotic forces, waters of destruction, demonic spirits, and worse would be unleashed. So, the stone was like a lock preventing Pandora's box from opening. And with this information, it's time for our journey to descend another layer deeper. Because, as I always tell you, when we research the origins of places or objects that people today call sacred, we often find the approach that most of them may be the wisdom of pre-flood eras and even the works of certain misunderstood beings called celestial gods. According to this approach, this sacred rock was actually placed there not for humans to communicate with the heavens, but to imprison a very ancient, primal being, the rebellious angel Azazel, who is said to be chained until the day of judgment. In the striking Book of Enoch, which entered our lives with the Dead Sea Scrolls, and which the Vatican has gone to great lengths to destroy, fallen angels are mentioned, who were tasked by God to observe humans and then descended to earth without His knowledge to live among humans. Since I have a video on the subject, I won't repeat myself and bore you. The link is in the description. One of the most important of these angels is Azazel, who, according to the book, indirectly caused great destruction in the world by giving humans knowledge of metalworking techniques, weapon making, and warfare. And as punishment for this, he was imprisoned in an underground pit where he would be chained until the day of judgment. This is precisely where our story begins to get interesting. I explained this in my Prophet Enoch video. The symbolic origins of these celestial angels, beings referred to as gods, can be traced back to the Anunnaki gods in ancient Sumerian belief. And this brings us to a past in the pre-flood era where these so-called gods and humans actually lived together. If you ask how this connects to Jerusalem, it's once again through the extraordinary story of Prophet Solomon. According to Israelite sources, Prophet Solomon lived only about 3,000 years ago. However, there's a problem here. While we have thousands of artifacts and inscriptions from even older history about prophets who were so powerful that they commanded jinn and the forces of nature, there is not a single academic proof about Prophet Solomon or his legacy outside of the Israelite corpus. There is no trace of his temple, no inscriptions, nor any information about him in other neighboring states. Now, if we take this simply, we would dismiss it as fabricated religious history. But we usually don't approach things that way on the channel. And as I mentioned in my Where Are the Prophets video, when we place these important figures in older history, even pre-flood history for some, the pieces fit together more accurately. And here, the symbolic secrets within the temple provide us with the greatest support. When Prophet Solomon chose the location for this extraordinary temple, he did not choose Mount Moriah without reason. As I mentioned earlier, the stone block on top of the mountain was seen for many years as a sacred space, a connection between the heavens and the earth. When we examine ancient cultures, we see that they generally built their sacred platforms and temples in high places where they believed the earth and sky merged. The Sumerians even had a special word for such places: Duranki, the bond between realms. Mount Moriah was likely regarded as such a powerful energy center long before King Solomon claimed it. The architectural design of the temple bears deep traces from the ancient Mesopotamian world. For example, the cherubim, depicted as protectors in the temple and generally imagined as angelic beings, are not a symbol belonging to Abrahamic religions. Their origins lie in the Lamassus, hybrid creatures believed to protect the cities of Assyria and Babylon. Lamassus had human faces, animal bodies, and wings. In Mesopotamian belief, these figures were not merely symbolic. They were directly connected to the Anunnaki, powerful beings said to control access to divine knowledge. The depiction of cherubim carved into the walls throughout Solomon's temple, woven into the temple curtain, and even guarding the Holy of Holies, shows that this ancient idea was adopted by the Israelites as well. They didn't call it Anunnaki worship, but they called them protectors of God's special areas. In other words, they simply unified their polytheistic figures under a single roof. However, the model and symbolism used remained exactly the same as the thousands of years old Mesopotamian beliefs. The construction of the temple's altar with 4 prominent horns also reflects a similar approach. In Sumerian art, gods wore horned crowns to display their power and divine status. The more horns a god had on his crown, the higher his status. According to this approach, it is highly probable that these horns on King Solomon's altar held more than just a decorative purpose. These horns might be reflecting the same celestial language as the symbols of divine authority used by the Anunnaki, indicating to us that it was an Anunnaki region, meaning a sacred area. The similarities don't end there. In the temple courtyard, there is a massive bronze basin, the Bronze Sea, resting on the backs of 12 ox statues. This structure is usually explained as a vessel used for the purification of priests. However, the story has a deeper meaning. In Mesopotamian belief, the Abzu was a sacred body of water connected to Enki, the god of creation, wisdom, and water. Sumerian temples often included a symbolic pool or basin to symbolize this cosmic spring. Solomon's Bronze Sea also appears as a reflection of the same idea, and with almost the same symbolism once again. Could this be a coincidence? Let's get to the cubical Holy of Holies chamber at the very heart of the temple. Mesopotamian temples had an inner chamber called the Kela, where divine beings were believed to physically enter or manifest in the world. In King Solomon's temple, it is described as being designed as a controlled area where a great power could be summoned or communicated with. And the temple follows the same architectural logic as ancient temples. Looking at all these similarities and saying, they are all just coincidences, feels like covering up the truth a bit to me. The temple was not built just to be beautiful or practical. It was designed with much older ideas and traditions in mind. The symbols, structure, layout, and architectural elements all point to the same concepts and cosmology found in the Sumerian Anunnaki belief. And it practically begs us to ask this question: was this temple, as told in the false history dictated to us by the Jews, built in 950 BCE, coincidentally and curiously, entirely with symbols based on Anunnaki belief, despite no evidence or witnesses? Or was it actually built using advanced techniques in a pre-flood era in the lost past of antiquity, where technologically superior beings and humans coexisted? The first option, even without any academic or symbolic support, naturally seems more logical than the second, doesn't it? Normal. Because we have started diving into the most extreme depths of history. But stay with me, because now it's time to examine the religious and esoteric texts that tell us how the temple was built, and more importantly, what lies beneath it. And you will see how the answer to the previous question is given, albeit unintentionally, by the very people who formed the corpus of this religion. Because now the story of Shamir begins. According to Talmudic tradition and various religious texts, Prophet Solomon commanded that no metal construction tools be used when building his temple. This was because it would be a place representing peace and divinity, so he forbade the use of these techniques of Azazel, which were humanity's inheritance and evoked violence. This information is also stated in the book as follows. The house, when it was being built, was made of stone prepared at the quarry, so that neither hammer nor axe nor any tool of iron was heard in the house while it was being built. So how could such a colossal structure be built without using metals? How could those stones be cut so precisely? This is where Shamir, one of history's most mysterious objects, comes into play. Shamir is a legendary substance or tool said to have played a vital role in the construction of King Solomon's temple. According to Talmudic tradition and various Jewish texts, Shamir was a supernatural object that Solomon used to cut the massive stones for the temple. Jewish legends claim that this mysterious substance had the power to cut not only stone but also iron and even diamonds without making the slightest sound. However, Shamir was not a cutting tool in the traditional sense. It was also said to be a small, living creature the size of a barley grain. This is an interesting point, because it shows us how shallow humanity remained in defining a previous advanced tool after the flood. Recall the descriptions of Shamir: small, silent, something very powerful that changes and shapes the structure of materials almost perfectly. So, when the Jews included this tool in their texts, they included it as something that could be a living creature filled with divine power. And they made the most frequently repeated symbolism error. In ancient texts, we often see people describing things they couldn't understand as smokeless fire, divine ember, celestial fire, divine essence. And often they use these terms for objects that we today call technology. Some modern commentators suggest that Shamir was not actually a living worm, but rather a lost type of ancient technology, a powerful tool, or a chemical substance. Its description as a living force could have been an attempt by ancient writers to describe something for which they did not yet have the language or scientific understanding, perhaps a type of chemical reaction, a specific vibrational frequency, or even a laser-like technology. When Shamir is mentioned, it is also stated that this dangerous object must be specially stored and that even unconscious persons touching it would have very serious consequences. Now, before moving on to the last part of the video, let's summarize everything a bit. If we take the story of Jerusalem and Solomon's temple as told by Israelite sources and assume its history points to the first millennium BCE, we face the following problems. Why was this temple built entirely using Anunnaki motifs and symbols? Why were tools with electrical properties, like the Ark of the Covenant, needed to communicate with God? Why were metals despised in the construction of the temple and treated as a kind of forbidden science? To which era did Shamir, which perfectly cut the stones used in the temple's construction and possessed ancient technology features, belong? Why was that stone on Mount Moriah, called the protective cover of underground chaos, chosen for the temple's construction? And most importantly, how was the legacy of Prophet Solomon forgotten in such a relatively short time despite all the superior knowledge and abilities Allah bestowed upon him? You cannot scientifically, let alone logically, answer any of these questions within the Jewish history dictated to us. But if we take a broader view and place Prophet Solomon, a person with superior qualities and serious magical powers, in short, a person who commanded advanced technology according to the narratives in all Abrahamic religious books in a time indicated by many civilizations and beliefs, a pre-flood era where advanced celestial beings and humans built a superior civilization together, then at least logic fits better, even if we don't have direct archaeological evidence. Prophet Solomon, that supreme sage, might have been a figure who lived in the advanced civilizations of the pre-flood era. The temple was filled with Anunnaki symbols because it might have been built in a pre-flood era when those beings, the lords, reigned. The information in almost every religious book that it was a sacred place for communicating with God also fits perfectly with this approach. Because those beings were not gods, they were merely a technological race, and the temple could have served as a communication base. What about those protective cherubim? And why was the Ark of the Covenant, which in most narratives is said to kill those who approach it, placed on that specific keystone? And why was that chamber the most secure and forbidden part of the temple? If we ask this, the hypothetical answer emerges. Because beneath that rock, Azazel, a cursed angel, a Malik, meaning a king, who rebelled against the gods and gave forbidden sciences to humans, was imprisoned. In short, according to this extreme approach, Solomon's temple was not a sanctuary, it was a prison. And over time, as people became disconnected from ancient knowledge, what were once technologies gradually transformed into divine symbols, and that place began to take its place in history as a sacred area. Now combine this extreme approach with other narratives. Why do religions insist that the apocalypse will begin with events in Jerusalem? Why do they say that the Antichrist and similar interesting dark forces will emerge from there? Why do they say that the Messiah will come there and fight these evil forces? And why do Jews and Zionists today persistently want to demolish the Dome of the Rock and rebuild the temple? Why have everyone from the Knights Templar to the Masons been digging under that temple for thousands of years? What are they looking for there? And why do they see this as an existential issue? And finally, what did the Templars find in their excavations, which we have now archaeologically proven they conducted, that allowed them to destroy Saladin's army and then become even more powerful than states in Europe? When you approach events this way, the complexion of the matter changes a bit, and even scenarios that seem extreme begin to make sense, don't they? In fact, I will provide you with deeper information on many of the topics I discussed here by making separate videos about them in the near future. But while making this video, I asked myself several times if I was pushing the boundaries too much, if things were going into absurd territory. However, when I look back, many of the things I am telling you now, however extreme or even utterly unbelievable they may sound, are believed with an unimaginable devotion by the people who govern the world today, and stating that building that third temple is the most important goal in their lives. They are slowly shaping the world accordingly, and they are doing all of this, from the trillions of dollars spent to the hundreds of thousands of lives lost, because they believe in the things I just told you. The ultimate goal, they say, is to re-establish communication with God through that new temple and enable Him to come here and sit on His throne. Well, what kind of belief is this? You realize that the God here is not an omnipotent creator, right? When you think about it this way, one honestly shivers a bit and wonders, what if these things are really true? What if these people really know something we don't? I hope these people are just types who are obsessed with religious symbols and that all these are just phenomena that go no further than an interesting video topic. Otherwise, as someone who believes we are not alone in this vast universe, everything from a celestial being held captive under the temple to the days when those who imprisoned it ruled humanity would head down a very, very dark path. Although I find these topics very interesting, I hope the reality is not so. I guess we will also see Israel and its servants, having intimidated all Islamic states in the region, demolishing the Dome of the Rock under some pretext and rebuilding the temple in the near future. Thank you all for watching. If you liked the video, you can support the channel by pressing the like button and sharing it with those around you. As I said, I will be focusing more on such topics in the coming months. You can accompany me on my journey by following the channel. See you in the next video. Take care of yourselves.